So Rodger,
Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Thank you so much for joining us today for the Harvard Humanitarian Initiative's Career in Humanitarian webinar for the month of May. My name is Sabrina Sarli, and I am the Administrative and Program Coordinator here at Harvard Humanitarian Initiative. We're thrilled to have you with us today, and we have great speakers from HHI who are going to tell you more about their careers in the humanitarian field. But before we begin, I want to tell you a little bit more about the logistics of the event today. Today we'll be here for about an hour. The first half will be dedicated to our panelists describing their career path, and the second half of the event will be for an audience Q&A session. I'd like to invite all of our attendees to submit questions through the Q&A button found at the bottom of your Zoom screen. Simply click that button and submit your questions via text. We'll do our best to go through as many questions as possible. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our two panelists for today. The first is Rodger LeGrand. He's an instructional designer at the Harvard Humanitarian Initiative. He focuses on developing learner-centered learning experiences for live, asynchronous, virtual classrooms and hybrid environments. He works closely with HHI's educational programs, including BBR, Building a Better Response, and the Executive Negotiation Project, ENP. He is also contributing to the plan for HHI's new learning management system. Welcome, Rodger. And then we also have Ynis Isimbi, who is the Monitoring and Evaluation Coordinator for the Executive Negotiation Project and for general activities at HHI. Prior to joining HHI, she was a research and evaluation analyst based in Rwanda's Ministry of Finance and Economic Planning. She holds a Master's of Science in Development Studies from the London School of Economics and Political Science and a Bachelor of Arts in Economics from the College of St. Benedict and St. John's University. Thank you so much for joining us today, Ynis. All right, so I will pass it off first to Rodger.
Okay, thank you very much, Sabrina. I'm going to share my screen here. All right, it should be showing for you. And great job hosting as always. Really appreciate what you're doing with these sessions. And while we're at it, I'd like to also thank Irini. Those of you who don't know, Dr. Irini Albanti is the executive director here at HHI and keeps these programs running along with Sabrina. And I think they're really, these are great sessions to have. A lot of people I talk with think that the humanitarian space is reserved for medical professionals. That's is not accurate. Medical professionals are essential to the humanitarian space, of course. I mean, no question. But there is also, a great need, as you'll hear from Ynis in a few minutes, for monitoring and evaluation professionals, program managers, project coordinators, finance officers, right? I mean, we all play a part in keeping this rolling. So I'm really glad to have the chance to contribute today. And actually, there's even room for a poet who loves to bake bread. You are looking at my bread right now. That's a picture of bread I recently made. So bread is flour, salt, and water, 3 ingredients, which I love very much. And together they form something that's utterly life-sustaining, which I think is beautiful and lovely. And I'm giving bread way too much credit here, but I do love it. And I think it's a great metaphor for humanitarian work. And if I can be biased for a moment, for humanitarian education. All right, let's get into this. I'll stop talking about bread for a few minutes, but I cannot promise I will hold out for long. So I began teaching at the Community College of Philadelphia immediately after graduating from Sarah Lawrence with an MFA, a Master of Fine Arts in Poetry. And I was teaching entry-level reading and writing to adult learners who were part of a program where they were coming straight from the prison system into the classroom. So it was complicated. And some of the students were also Vietnam War vets who were suffering with PTSD very visibly, like they would pick up chairs and throw them in class or desks. So it was pretty intense at times. And I learned a lot about empathy in teaching by being at the Community College of Philadelphia. It was a great experience. And, you know, really wonderful community of learners. And I got to work on reading curriculum and writing curriculum while I was there, which was great. And my first experience really technically working with curriculum development. Before I started making the jump over to the University of Pennsylvania, I taught at a few other programs, writing programs for me, always writing. And great schools, Temple, University of the Arts, I won't list them all, but really great schools, great students. But Penn is where things kind of changed for me. I made the leap into academic administration, became the director of academic administration and associate director of critical writing, where I worked on adult learning curriculum for the College of Liberal and Professional Studies. Wonderful experience. Also, I'll add, working with vets, Iraq and Afghanistan vets, who were, you know, using education to try and transition back into civilian life. So really great experience working at Penn. And I'll say, great leadership. The director of the program, really smart, always funny, great to work with. And as a writer, always revising. It's relevant to bring that up because instructional design for me is really an academic administration function. So we're always doing program analysis, program outcomes. It's where Ynis and I work very closely together, working on understanding best practices and learner outcomes for students, but also how to improve program-wide initiatives. And I got a lot of that experience working with the great team at Penn. After Penn, I made my way over to MIT, where you know, I did kind of straight ahead instructional design work. I was still part of working groups administratively, working on curriculum development. But I was working on developing writing instruction that would be integrated into the sciences, into physics, into material sciences. Civil and environmental engineering was one of my favorites, but several programs. And I would teach the writing component and the scientists would teach the, you know, the science component. And we collaborated on, as subject experts on the instructional development, which is great. So it gave me a lot of experience seeing the way, you know, all of these experiences along the way gave me a lot of opportunity to see the way education can influence students and the outcomes it can have on their lives. And now here at HHI, I work with really great subject experts. We've done a lot of time doing field work in a humanitarian context. And we together provide continuing education and professional development courses for humanitarian workers at INGOs, NGOs, and you know, grassroots organizations in context. We provide, you can think of it as foundational content and also applied field-focused courses to help our learners understand the challenges they will face as they enter the humanitarian space. That's kind of, where we live in all of this. One of these areas that I'm most interested in is the idea of education as a rapid crisis response tool. And if you want to, I didn't put the link here, but if you want to go to Building a Better Response, all one word, buildingabetterresponse.org. That's buildingabetterresponse.org. If you go to that website, you can check out the Ukraine response page. I have some stills of it up here for you right now. But you'll get to see an example of what I mean by education as humanitarian education as rapid response, putting it right in the field, in the hands of the people who need it most, right? Who need direct access to particular content. And I'm also very passionate about developing education materials that support, education around climate change and specifically its effects on vulnerable populations. So I'm eager to get started on some materials in that area as well. So instructional designers in humanitarian education really need to have those close working relationships with subject experts who have the field experience that we desperately need to capture in a classroom context. And then in addition, we need to spend a lot of time focused on course planning and course development while always thinking about the learner's experience of taking a course, whether it's self-paced, whether it's instructor-led, right, virtual or live synchronous, it doesn't matter. We should always be thinking about what they're going through when they access our materials. Learner-centered education, Sabrina had mentioned earlier, and that's the idea. And actually, learner-centered education is data-driven education, and that too is where Ynis and I find really great overlap in our work, as you'll hear from her in a few minutes. But we'll evaluate everything from delivery, the approach to the content, the learner outcomes, assessment of not only the students' work, but of our work as a team, creating something that we intend to be extraordinary for them as they try to make improvements in their work life. Okay, so let's take this a little bit further and take a closer look at what instructional design in humanitarian education looks like here at HHI. Our mission is to educate the humanitarian community through the development of learning experiences that promote quality instruction. I want to stress that, quality instruction. Learner knowledge retention, so they are able to hold on to what they learned, and learner knowledge transfer, so they can use what they learned in other contexts. And equality of education accessibility. We want this to go to everyone, right? Our vision is to set the global standard in humanitarian education for asynchronous, blended, and live classroom instruction through a commitment to ensuring that our students have extraordinary educational experiences that inform their safety, health, and skills in humanitarian contexts, whether it's a disaster or a conflict zone. We want them to have all of that support. That's our vision. And what we value is an unflinching commitment to human dignity. I could say it like 10 times, right? An unflinching commitment to human dignity and the equal right to education for everyone, as well as diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility in curriculum design, faculty selection, student recruitment, and accessibility of asynchronous and synchronous course delivery. All of these are fundamental to what we value here at HHI. The foundation to my approach to instructional design, education, and academic administration. And understand, I see these as three, sides of the same object. They're all linked to me. But the foundation of my approach is directly informed by being a poet. I mentioned earlier I have an MFA from Sarah Lawrence. I also have seven or so books in print. published pretty widely in magazines, nominated for the Pushcart Award a couple times. So poetry is central to my life. I don't know that it's as central as bread. I mean, there might be a toss up there, but I don't think one would mind more than the other. But certainly, poetry has shaped who I am as a person, and you know, it's almost as though I'm an educator because I write poems. You understand? I'm an educator because I'm in the arts, because I think about the arts. I'll explain that to you. Poetry in the arts, the great poet Stephen Dobbins, the D-O-B-Y-N-S, Dobbins, the great poet Stephen Dobbins has said that poetry and the arts inform our emotions. They inform our emotions. If I had more time, I would have prepared some examples for you and pulled in some really great poems that we could talk about, but I'll talk about one rather than reading it to you. The poet Jack Gilbert, just as an example, has written many poems about the loss of his wife. When you read those poems, you can feel the grieving. You can feel the loss, the pain of the loss. And it teaches us something about that experience that we may not have had yet, but we can still appreciate, we can still feel that and internalize that, even though we may not have accessed it ourselves in our own lives. And on the other side, as writers, we try to imagine what the reader needs in order to access those feelings. So the writer is always thinking about what needs to happen when working on a poem, or working on paintings, or working on music, or whatever. It's the arts are the arts. But it's all about based on what you're trying to achieve as an artist. And when you go to do the work as a reader, and you open up a book of poems and you read it, you're open to receiving that information. Otherwise, why are you opening the book, right? And the same for music, same for film, or sculpture, whatever, dance, it really doesn't matter. But my point is, there's a relationship that gets built between the poet and the reader. But I'm going to extend that out and say, in this case, between the teacher and the student, or the instructional designer and the student, or the administrative team and the student, or the subject expert and the student. We're going to kind of stretch that out a little bit, and you can see a clear parallel here. Poets and writers, right side of the screen, are always focused on craft awareness, craft devices, line breaks, word choice, the music of language, right? We're always thinking about these things. And educators are as well. And I'm putting everyone that I just listed, subject experts, admin, writing program administrators I mentioned earlier. I mean, any one of you, subject experts, Ynis, M&E, right? I'm putting all of you in that category of educators, and educators are thinking about craft as well. We all need to be. In a classroom setting, in an instructional design setting, we might be thinking, what does the student need to know first? What are they coming in already knowing? So how should I set this up? What kind of visual materials should I be using in order to make the message? How will the student be assessed? These are all craft decisions about being in the classroom or being in a self-paced environment that we think through as we're designing a course. The next one, metaphor, go down one. This one's a little more frontal metaphor, but I'll quote Dobbins again. And actually, looking at my bookshelf here, there's another great poet, Robert Haas, H-A-A-S, if you want to check him out. He has some essays. I think he's written about metaphor as well. I'm going back a while now, thinking about this stuff. Robert Haas, Stephen Dobbins on metaphor. So think of metaphor as a instant of insight, like a moment of clarity, a moment of insight that you get when you look at one thing and it has an instantaneous trigger that reveals something entirely unrelated, right? So you look at one thing and boom, just your mind explodes into this other area. And teachers use this as well. Instructional designers use this as well. There's a full authoring tool called Storyline. where you would take and tell a story as a metaphor to help learners access a concept. So we would work with Ynis, get the idea of where they are, where are they coming in as thinkers, expertise level, knowledge level, and then have the right kind of story, the right kind of metaphor to take where they are, build on that so they can access a higher level of understanding. And we use metaphor that way as teachers, as educators. Next, we have process. Process is essential for poets and writers and artists, and it's essential for teaching and instructional design and for academic administration. We always want to have a process in place to make sure we can aim for consistent, high quality results. In instructional design, we have the ADDIE model, which is not an adult learning theory. It's a process model that could be used in tech, for instance, or it could be used in graphic design. It starts with analysis, it ends with evaluation, and that is the model. And it's used to try and facilitate high results. And then at the end, bottom of that column, it all comes back to empathy. As teachers, instructional designers, as subject experts, we all need to be thinking about our learners and what they're going through, our students, our readers, if we're talking about poems. In writing, we call it audience awareness. Instructional design, we call it audience analysis. And it's far more rigorous in instructional design, no doubt, but there's certainly overlap. The analysis, again, is directly, we would pull Ynis in and get her moving on understanding that. All right, so you can think of the Humanitarian Academy at Harvard as a central learning portal, a central hub for learning in the humanitarian space, where we're developing insights into humanitarian education and research. And through the use of our new LMS, which Sabrina mentioned earlier in the call, we have a new LMS coming on where we're going to unify a lot of these components. Learners will be able to access content and expect to find new learning experiences that will be accessible in pretty remote locations. So we're really working to expand the reach of deliverability. Our goal, and my personal goal, is to contribute to the kind of learning experience and educational programming that will help humanitarian workers over any level, any skill level, to do that thing, to accomplish that mission statement of being safer, healthier, and better prepared to meet the demands of whatever they may encounter in the field. With that in mind, if you are interested in starting a career in the humanitarian space, I have some recommendations. Pursue an area of work that gets you excited. I mean, legit, like you want to wake up every day and do this. You can't wait to get started. You need boundaries, right? You need to stop at the end of the day. Sometimes it's hard, but humanitarians are passionate. We love what we do, and we believe in making meaningful contributions to the world. As I said in the opening, it doesn't have to be medical related. If it is, great, do it. But it could be M&E, it could be education, it could be a lot of things. Whatever gets you started, gets you excited, that's what you focus on. So I have an assignment for you. I can't help myself. If you can take out a notebook and at the end of this, after you finish hearing Ynis speak about her work, take out a notebook and write down a few things that get you excited. And if you're interested in being in the humanitarian space, I don't care, maybe it's food, right? I've got the bread there, right? Maybe it's food security, maybe it's housing, maybe it's language, maybe it's water. Who knows? Whatever gets you, make a list and then research it. Explore groups working in areas that interest you. Find out what they're talking about. Capture that in your notebook. Do a little legwork to figure out how you can align what really gets you excited about, entering this field and what's out there, so you can make that connection and really hook things up and get connected. When you're doing this research, do not be afraid to send an invite on LinkedIn. And in fact, I don't know, I can't see the chat, but Sabrina, feel free to put my LinkedIn profile link my LinkedIn link into the chat. Anyone on the call, if you want to talk about humanitarian education, reach out anytime. If I can help and answer some questions, I'll be more than happy to. If I can't, I will be direct so that you know not to, you know, that I'm actually not able to help. But if I have any way of answering your questions, I certainly will. So get connected. And be proactive. I mean, you know, it's your life. Take some initiative and really do it. You wouldn't be on this call if you weren't ready to make that step. So write it down, put it in a notebook, and use that as your starting point. And very important here, keep learning. Learn how to use all. If you're interested in, I really can only talk about the education side. If you're interested in the education side of humanitarian work. Learn how to use all of the e-learning authoring tools. Learn how to use as many LMS platforms as you can. Instructional design they have a lot of tech involved. There's a lot of tech involved in these positions. So it's really important that you learn how to take these things up, and you do not need to be in a role to do so. You can get trials. You can write to me and ask me what's going on. I can point you in the direction of some of these things. But I think most importantly, and I think I hope you'll get what I'm saying here, even though it's very tech heavy, it's our job as educators to make sure it doesn't feel robotic. I don't want it to ever feel robotic to our subject experts. I don't want it ever to feel robotic to our admin. And I certainly don't ever want it to feel robotic to our learners. And we are here for them. So also, and I do really think this is important, I'm not trying to be funny, go read some poems, write some poems, paint or play music or something. Do something that connects you to this idea of listening to others, of empathizing with others through creating and appreciating the work created by others. It's about that idea, right, from Dobbins that I shared with you earlier. The arts inform our emotions. And I think, if I may be so bold, we need a little more of that right now. In the world, we need some more empathy. And lastly, I'm also not joking about this, though I do have a smile on my face. Go ahead and get some flour, salt, and water, and put your hands in some dough and bake some bread. It's a great experience. I'm sure many of you do. And as I said, you know, earlier, a few minutes ago, 3 simple, elegant ingredients that when combined can sustain life. And there really is something lovely about that. Thank you very much for your time. Sabrina, I will turn it back to you.
Great, thank you so much, Rodger. And I will pass it over to Ynis.
Thank you, Rodger, for the wonderful presentation. I will start sharing my screen. So yeah, thank you, Sabrina, for putting this together and giving us the opportunity to just share with everyone our work here at HHI and kind of our journey to get here. So as Sabrina said, my name is Ynis Isimbi, and I'm the Monitoring and Evaluation Coordinator here at HHI. And so a little bit about me. I was born in Rwanda and raised in Rwanda and South Africa. I have a little picture here of a beautiful aerial photo of tea plantations in Rwanda here. So I got my bachelor's in economics at the College of St. Ben's and St. John's University. During my time there, I studied abroad at the Imperial College London through Foundational for International Education. And my study abroad experience really brought me to my master's at LSE. During that time, I toured the campus and fell in love with it. And there was a professor at that time, the late Tandikam Kandawire, who was working giant in African development economics. So when the time came for me to do my graduate studies, I kind of had no question on where I would go to get my master's. So I did my master's in development studies, as you see there. And then kind of like how I got into the field, for me, I want to say that it was kind of a natural progression, even though it may not seem, I don't know if natural is the right word, but both my parents work in the humanitarian and development field. My mom is a doctor by practice, but now she works in the public health sector, specifically on programs for like nutrition and early childhood development. And my father, on the other hand, is an agronomist who works in conservation, environmental sustainability, in both humanitarian and development work. So for me, it was always kind of a field that I loved, that I thought I would end up in, and I've been really privileged to have been working in this. So I like to say that kind of the work that I do kind of is that what's the word? I love translating research and evaluation to be applied to the communities that we serve and specifically marginalized populations. So that's about my background in terms of the career. And then outside of work, I really enjoy watching rugby and sports in general. I have a picture here on the left. I don't know if you can see it, of a game that we went to, well, way before COVID as the sun was setting. So I hope you see how beautiful it was there as well. And then I enjoy trying like new restaurants. I'm a big foodie, love traveling with my partner, really into very colorful fashion. And mostly outside of work, I'm very passionate about advocating for ending period poverty. So now that you know a bit about me, how I got here, as I mentioned, I have a background in economics from CSBSJU, where I studied abroad. And then during my time in undergrad, I really had different opportunities to kind of hone in my research skills. I was an RA for a local NGO that was providing computer literacy to youth in Mombasa. But then throughout my time there, I was also an international student mentor for international students. I thought it was really somewhere I could give back, as I was also an international student. After graduating, I thought it would be really important for me to kind of get real world experience before I pursued my master's. So I worked at a public affairs firm where I did a lot of research and policy work and advocacy in different sectors, and kind of pursuing policymakers and influencing them to pass bills. We worked on projects from energy and transmission to one that I can remember is the Safe Staffing Quality Care for Nurses Care Act in New York. So that was really good experience, and it built my research skills and just to get an understanding of a lot of the work that people do in legislation and policy. And during my time as well, I was doing research for grant work at the YWCA, which is not to be mistaken with the YMCA. This is the Young Women's Christian Association. I was doing social media work for a small NGO, and also doing interpretation for the International Rescue Committee, where I translated for refugees and people who were coming into the country. So I think during that period, I was just trying to hone in my skills and just get a wide variety of experiences just to find out what interests me. And so when I went to my grad school at LSE, I was really, again, involved with my department, but at the same time, I joined a group called the Program for African Leadership at LSE. It's just a community of young African students who are very passionate about building the continent, but at the same time also doing their masters. So for me, this has been a community that I'm still in touch with. I also mentor students who are African, who are at LSE, just helping them navigate the life there. And then when I was done with my coursework at LSE, I ended up, I started working with Christian Aid, which is where I kind of got into humanitarian work. I was doing a lot of research and policy work for them. I worked on different projects. Like within the UK, we worked on proposing and influencing banks to shift like funding out of fossil fuels to clean energy and green investments. We worked on, I worked on projects for internal displacement, refugee work, programs focused in on war and conflict. So I really kind of used a lot of the skills that I'd gotten from my master's and applied it to work. So it was a really exciting time to kind of apply a lot of the skills. So after I graduated and finished work at Christian Aid, I moved back home to Rwanda. I felt that it was a very natural, again, progress and necessary period of my time to kind of go back to work and do work that I love doing within Rwanda, since I'm very passionate about the development of Rwanda. So I did a few consultancies where, again, I was really doing a lot of research and evaluation. So for CETA, the Swedish agency, I did a lot of political economy research and social development work for their program that they were building with Rwanda. And then for the World Bank, I did a lot of, I collaborated with a consultant there on improving impact evaluations within the Ministry of Agriculture in Rwanda. And we did a lot of capacity buildings and just increasing evidence-based policy work and research within the country. And then after that, I thought I think it would be key for me to be at a more permanent position. And that's when I started working with GIZ. I was a research and evaluation analyst, but based in the Ministry of Economic Planning and Finance. So this was a really, really good opportunity for me to hone in all the skills that I've had and manage this position of working with an agency, but at the same time working with government. And so I got to work on a lot of projects, from public investment projects to like fisheries projects to like gender projects. And I think one of the biggest accomplishments was we co-developed an M&E guideline for Rwanda in terms of supporting different ministries and departments on how they could build a framework that's strong. So that was, for me, I think, very eye-opening, and I had a lot of opportunities to improve my data skills. I got to do like work on CG modeling, which I hadn't done before, as I was previously very focused on micro work. So that was very broadening for me. And during my time there as well in Rwanda, I joined the Global Shaper community for the World Economic Forum, which is, if you don't know, is a community of young professionals who are very interested in driving change in their communities. We did a lot of different projects, and I think it was a good opportunity for me to just do work that I'm interested in. And so one of the work, I got an opportunity to kind of like do interview and work with people who are heavily involved in like the period poverty space. So if you are in a place where they have a hub, I would encourage you to join, as it's a very like young professional program and very encouraging for you to make the change that you want in your communities. And then during COVID, my partner and I moved back to the US, and that's how I came to HHI. And I will explain this in more details, but at HHI, I work mostly on the executive negotiation project with Rodger as well, with building a better response with Rodger as well, and on HHI-wide M&E activities. So as mentioned before, the ENP project aims at developing professional skills of executive leaders, senior frontline humanitarian practitioners in negotiation, conflict resolution, and community engagement. And so for me here, what I mainly do is I work on the M&E plans. So from data collection, data analysis, building surveys for the courses and the workshops, and then evaluating how participants felt about the workshops and just getting feedback. And this is where I work mainly with Rodger, as Rodger is also working on the courses. And so in addition to that, I also report to HHI, funders and partners. And so recently I also started working with BBR. I encourage you all, I know Rodger talked a lot about it. If you are a humanitarian practitioner, or if you're thinking of joining the humanitarian sector, I think this is a really good opportunity for you to take the course and see what's happening. But I also know that a lot of organizations do ask employees to complete this. So I think it would be an advantage. And for BBR as well, I do data analysis work, M&E as well, and I also report to funders, partners, and HHI. And then for HHI organizational level, where I really work with Irini and Sabrina and Tanya and the team. Here we work a lot on finding best practices. So improving processes at HHI, sharing lessons learned within programs, and just improving overall the impact of our organizations, and how do we show that, or how do we present this to the world, the work that we do. And I'm also working part of a team that are building HHI's first impact report. So a lot of exciting work. I'm happy to take more questions about what I do. But like Rodger, I will leave you with a few suggestions in terms of what I would say has helped me get here. Build connections and expand your relationships. I think there's always opportunity to meet people, network, reach out on LinkedIn, attend webinars like these. I think that has been a lot of good help for me, where I've gotten job opportunities because I was speaking to someone within the sector and so forth. I would say develop key skills for the career you're interested in. So for example, you can go on LinkedIn and search like someone with the same career or job that you want to do, and see what skills they have. With online learning, very accessible these days. You don't necessarily have to go to school if you don't have the funds or the opportunities. So access has become very easy. We can just go online and find courses, and I think those are great ways to get skills that you may have necessarily not learned, or you don't want to go and get another degree just so you can get skills in like data analysis. As Rodger mentioned as well, learning, there's always opportunities to grow. So just be open, be on the lookout for anything new that you can learn. And then lastly, I like to say this to my friends and family and everyone who comes in contact with me is basically put yourself out there. There really isn't much to lose. Try that new hobby, try that new skill, apply to the job that you want to apply to. Rejection is hard, but I think the gains are so much more. And yeah, that is it for me. I will also leave my LinkedIn here. If you would like to connect or ask questions, I'm really always happy to help and chat with people who are interested in my career. I do a lot of mentoring and a lot of conversations with young professionals who are wanting to get into this kind of work. So please do reach out to me. I try to look at my LinkedIn on a regular basis, but if not, the latest will be a month. So thank you, Sabrina, back to you.
Thank you so much, Ynis and Rodger. Rodger, I'd like to invite you back to the Zoom platform. Great. So now we'll have time to answer audience Q&A questions. As a reminder, feel free to drop your questions in the Q&A function found at the bottom of your screen. But the first question that I'd like to start off with is, what is the best career advice that you've received that you think would be applicable for those joining us today?
I'll start if you don't mind. I had a mentor years ago tell me not to be afraid to go for it, to try, not to be afraid to make connections and to put myself out there, and be willing to sometimes we don't get the feedback we'd like to receive when we take those risks, and it prevents us from being proactive. And I remind all of my students and friends of that advice. It was helpful to me. Ynis, what was yours?
I think I have two. I have one that was given to me, and then I'll give one myself that I think I've learned along the way. So I come from a very much, so my background is in economics, and I come from a very male-dominated industry. And I think the best career advice that my mentor gave me at that time was to just let go of all my fears and understand that everyone in the same is like probably in the same situation as you are. So whatever fears they have, you probably have. So like I said, go for that, apply to that job, learn that new skill. Like, you are as worthy and as, skilled as majority of your peers. And then for me, like Rodger said, I think the best career advice that I always tell people is put yourself out there. Like there's really not much to lose. And even if you fail, I think there's always a new skill to be learned out of every opportunity. So look at it, go with it with a positive mindset, I would say.
And I'll add also that be fearless, but be responsible. Like, do your research and make sure you're exploring the areas that you really mean to explore. Sending out 1,000 emails a day or something is not going to be as helpful as, really exploring and doing research and being knowledgeable about what it is you actually want to do with your life. We live once. So think about think about what's meaningful to you, and fill your notebooks up. I have that assignment for you. Fill your notebooks up with these ideas and keep a record.
Great, thank you both so much. So we have a question in the chat asking, for someone with a business and corporate background, what would be ways to get started if you do want to have a career in the humanitarian field?
I have a little experience with business and corporate, and I think there's a lot of, as much as I talked about the arts, I could have easily talked about corporate. There's a lot of transferable knowledge, transferable skills from one environment into the other. Actually, corporate's a great place to really learn how to be process focused and to get organized and to meet your deliverables and targets. And you can carry a lot of that over into the humanitarian space in a meaningful way, so that you know that the contribution you're making is measurable and meaningful. And that's where Ynis will come in with a ruler and measure all of your results. Ynis, what are your thoughts on corporate?
No, I definitely agree. I think a lot of the skills in corporate, I would say I haven't worked in corporate necessarily, but the work that I did at the public affairs firm was very much similar in that you have a lot of like organized deliverables. You have a lot of, I would say, effective processes that are very appreciated in the humanitarian sector. However, I will put a note in that I think it's very important to understand a lot of the context in which a lot of the humanitarian work is in. I think navigating through a lot of the sectors that we work in, it's very important for you to also kind of get background knowledge on that. So if you're interested in working in a project of, I don't know, conflict or like nutrition, like you said before, what does that look like in the context that you want to work in? How are those skills transferable? So I would just say, like, maybe pivoting your skills to be relevant in the work that we do.
Yeah, nice way to put it. I think phrasing it as a pivot is quite good. Yeah, well done.
On the subject of skills, what skills do you think are most crucial to have a successful career in the humanitarian space? Whether, whatever career that you're in, whether it's in monitoring and evaluation or instructional design, are there any general transferable skills that you think would be applicable?
You want to start this one, Ynis? Because I can probably run.
Sure, I can do it. Well, I can't speak for a lot of other people's work, but I think for me specifically, I think I've navigated through kind of a few different positions that are not necessarily M&E, but also research and evaluations, and they all kind of tie together. So for me, I would say important skills would be a lot of data analysis. Data is a big thing presently, so it's very valuable to be able to like manage large sets of data. And also I would encourage people to go online. If you haven't had these skills, there's tons of available online courses that will teach you these skills like without going to class. So I would say data analysis work, data visualization is good. M&E, there's tons of courses, of course, that could help. And then research, I would say, is something that it comes, we all do research in some ways, but it's developed by doing. So yeah, even if it's a small project, if you practice at it, yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think certainly understanding how to, read a spreadsheet, is something everyone needs to know. But I'll take a bigger step back even and look at it from even more distance and say, I think what you need to have across all of these disciplinary perspectives within the humanitarian framework is belief in the mission, belief in human dignity, belief in helping people and caring and the ability to empathize. I mean, all of these things, I can't think of a single person I work with in this environment that doesn't have those qualities, who isn't really passionate about, helping out, helping people and making a difference. So I think that's it's a bit of a step back, but that's a bigger view, but I think it's relevant.
Great, thank you. So another question is, what role has mentors have had in your life? And do you have any advice for how you would go about reaching out and finding a mentor?
Well, I've been lucky. I mentioned a mentor earlier. I've been lucky to have good leadership in my experiences, and I found that they kind of happened organically. And when someone that you admire and you look at their workflow and you're like, wow, I really admire the way this person gets things done, or the way this person, I don't know, does something, whatever you look up to in that person. Align yourself with that, do those things and create that relationship by showing, not just telling, hey, you're important to me. You should do that too, but don't just tell them, actually show them by, demonstrating what I think of as the proper way to care, which is I'll make sure I follow through as well, and then align yourself so that the relationship happens kind of organically. What do you think about that, Ynis?
Yeah, I agree. I think I've also had different mentors at different times of like my career or life, I would say, where I mentioned earlier, I had a mentor in undergrad who was an econ professor who I think for me was the biggest person at that time, who kind of pushed me to put myself out there and value myself and what I bring to the table within the econ community. And then as I progressed into this M&E career and doing research and evaluation, I think I've just connected with people at different like workshops, different events who I'm in like absolutely love that what they're doing. So reaching out, and I think, like you said, it happens organically, but I think it's also important to realize that one mentor, like you don't have to have one mentor, you can have multiple mentors for different times of your life in terms of what you need. So, and then to answer your question as well, Sabrina, of how important they've been, I think for me, they've really been helpful in kind of like encouraging and, connecting me to different opportunities. And I think if you can find a mentor early on, I think the better, as it doesn't even have to be a mentor or someone, a peer, to kind of give you advice on things that you shouldn't do that maybe, so you don't have to go through the same struggles, I would say.
Great, thank you both. And then how do you cope or handle with the stress of your job? I know, Rodger, you said that, you enjoy poetry and baking or baking bread. But yeah, how do you handle the day-to-day stressors that come up?
Well, I think maybe this is my coping mechanism, but I don't really think about stress that way. I think part of the issue when we feel stress is we're kind of ruminating on it and thinking about it. And if we kind of, and this is something I've made a habit of doing for years. If I think about those things that are presenting a challenge, how can I embrace that as as part of what I want to do? It's almost like when you go, I'll give you an example, a quick metaphor. If you go outside and it's really cold and everyone's like, oh, it's cold out here. But if you go outside with the thinking of, oh, good, I needed the fresh air, the coldness hits you differently. And that's kind of how I approach stress at work. It's like, okay, this has to get done. It's urgent. There's a time on it. And that's where a lot of people feel stressed, is around time, I think. So instead of thinking of it as, oh, I'm going to get this done, I think, all right, good. This is urgent. Now we know we've got to step into this and get it going. Ynis, you're smiling. Do you have a different take on that?
Not different. I would say I'm a big supporter of work and life balance. I learned that the hard way. I think a lot of people have the tendency of overworking themselves, and people have different capacities on, handling stress. So I would say I would give advice that someone has given me. I haven't mastered it. I'm really bad at saying no. Learning how to create boundaries. So I love having a lot of stuff to do, but sometimes it's always best, sometimes to say no, or to be like, you know what, I'll get this done the next day, or, like taking it on, but giving yourself some grace, I would say. So it's a work in progress. Building boundaries is never easy, I think, especially for some of us. But yeah, I think sometimes it's good to say no, because at the end of the day, you also don't want to do work rushing or badly. So yeah.
Great. So I am mindful of the time, but I do just have one quick question for both of you very quickly. What excites you most about your work?
Do you want me to go first, or?
Yeah, you might as well. I don't know that I could say one thing. I could start my presentation all over again.
Well, really quickly for me, I think, as I mentioned in my presentation, I am passionate about serving marginalized populations. And I think in the work that I do with dealing with skills that I have, so I do a lot of data work and then, helping people. So I think it's a combo of a good, like things that I'm good at, but work that I'm also passionate about. And I think it's a very hard thing to do, to find that sweet spot of using your skills to do work that you're really passionate about.
I'll try and say it quickly. I'll steal from another poet, Shelley, and I'll say he had putting the right words in the right order. I think putting the right education, the right courses in front of the right students is very exciting for me. I'll just keep it simple at that because of the time.
All right, well, thank you both so much for taking the time to speak with us today. On behalf of the Harvard Humanitarian Initiative, I'd like to thank all of you for attending and tuning into this event. Follow us on our website, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn to hear about any upcoming events, announcements, job openings. And with that, I would like to thank you all so much for joining, and we hope to see you again soon.
Thank you.
Sabrina.
Bye.